20 years ago, voters paved the way for Rio Nuevo, a multi-purpose district tasked with revitalizing downtown Tucson. It began with a rocky start, but in recent years, Rio Nuevo has had a hand in prominent developments like the new Caterpillar headquarters and the AC Marriott Hotel. The string of successes led state lawmakers to keep the district going beyond its 2025 expiration date. We recently checked in with Rio Nuevo Chair Fletcher McCusker to discuss what's on the horizon. We're coming up on the 20th year now for Rio Nuevo. I imagine you'd like to give it an A rating. Where would you place it?
You would have to say mixed, I think, because there's really three different periods of Rio Nuevo. The first 10 years, we actually call them the lost years, because so much money was wasted, literally. And then the legislature intervened and took a couple of years to get going, and then the last 5 years have been pretty productive. So you kind of have to break it down into three different components.
At some point, it was considered controversial because of the money that was lost. What would you say to people who maybe need a refresher or reminder on how exactly the funding works and why the state legislature had to get involved?
Well, the TIFs were early. They were legislative and basically turned over to city governments to run. So the legislature, once they approved it, even though it's state money, kind of took a hands-off attitude. So it just literally ran off the rails. Several projects were launched. They were abandoned. There wasn't any accountability for the money. Eventually, the press got onto that. The Star did a very thorough investigative report, and eventually, it hit the fan. And the legislature was faced with some options. We could shut it down, and in what they viewed as corruption, or we could try and reset it. So what the state did in 2010, 10 years into Rio Nuevo's history, was basically take control of it from the city government.
Now the Rio Nuevo board has to report annually to the legislature. Its members are appointed by the state and they can be removed at any time. There have been some remarkable developments in the downtown Tucson area. I know this is a tough question, but what are you most proud of at this point?
I think just the overall activity. We've done 20 projects in the last 5 years, and almost all of them is some sort of retail, some sort of modernization of an older vacant storefront. If you look at downtown now compared to where it was 5 years ago, people often compare us to what Austin was like a few years ago. So it's hip, it's young people, it's food and beverages. There's 85 restaurants downtown now. When I moved my company down there in 2010, I think there were 3.
McCusker also credits downtown's resurgence to greater interest from outside investors and business owners. The Tucson Convention Center is next in line for a facelift. The Rio Nuevo board recently approved a $65 million project to renovate all of the venues on the property and build 2 new parking garages. Tell me about some of the processes that are in place to ensure that if you make a deal with Rio Nuevo, that you have to own up to your side of the bargain as well.
The most significant change we make is when we do a project like that, we take title to the property. So if there is a failure, Rio Nuevo will end up owning it. That wasn't the case years ago. And we invite the developers to bring in other investors, other lenders, other financial help. So we're not the only ones that are investing dollars. That's a dramatic change in the last several years. Right now, we're only putting up about 10% of the overall cost of any one of our projects. But we have the most leverage in that eventually, if the project fails, we will actually get it back. And that would have prevented a lot of the issues that the early Rio Nuevo organization had if they approached it the same way that we did.
Some of the more visible elements for people, I think, are Caterpillar, Cathedral Squares, Sunshine Mile. What's left as you think about here we are at the 20-year mark? What's to come?
There's still a lot of infill downtown, parking lots that I think are going to stand up and likely go vertical. Downtowns are about height. I think you're going to see 11, 12, 14, 20-story buildings. They're going to have retail on the bottom. They're going to have parking, which to help ease the problem. And we're seeing a lot of residential interest. So as we speak, there's 2,000 apartments being built in our downtown urban environment. Coincidentally, they will have the highest rents of anything in Pima County. So I think that's indicative of the interest and demand there are for people to live in the urban environment. They're not all millennials. You would be surprised. Half of the population that's living downtown right now are people my age.
How much do you consider public input? Because some people will hear high-rises and swimming pools and development, but what about those, as you said, those barrios that are right next door that will say, we want to stay the way we are?
Everything we do is in the public. We're a public entity. Everything we do has to be done in a public meeting. We always have a call to the audience. Moreover, we do a lot of reach out. When the DoubleTree was looking at putting their property on Cushing, it's immediately across the street from one of our most historic barrios. So before they even drew the project, we started meeting with those neighbors about what that might mean, how it might and should look, the opportunities to create buffers, to create outdoor activity that the barrio residents frankly could use. And ultimately, we didn't have any opposition from that historical neighborhood for the 175-bed DoubleTree Hotel. And it just shows that you need to, I think if all developers would do this, a lot of the controversy we have in development would be easier to manage if you just sit down and talk about it.
Sounds like a true balancing act.
It has been, and it's working. So no complaints from us.
Okay, Fletcher, thanks so much.
Thank you.